Hello there, this is Luis Santos, and today I'll be talking about the rise of a zombie and basically just how zombies gain popularity in our modern era. So, a brief introduction: zombies are just a great way to highlight how our modern life is. Basically, they're a great metaphor of how we face problems such as mental health, pandemics, overpopulation, and lack of resources, which although we've been able to fight off in a way, they always just keep coming in bigger waves or even stronger versions, such as in pandemics where the viruses just keep evolving. For a little bit of a brief background on zombies, the first movie that included a zombie was by Victor H. and it was in 1932. This movie was called The White Zombie. And overall, the story of the zombie, or just like how the story's been narrated, it hasn't really changed. It follows the same format where basically the zombies, although they lack any intelligence or physical attributes that makes them like scary, they still have the numbers advantage. So they basically what they will do is just drain your energy of fighting them, and they'll just drag it on until it feels boring and just you either die to the zombie or just keep fighting until you die to a zombie. So for my thesis statement, and the goal of this paper will be well, I'll read the thesis first. In this paper, I will be exploring how zombies are a metaphor that correlate to our fears of modern global issues by making use of Chuck Klosterman's essay, My Zombie Myself, and Why Modern Life Feels Rather Undead, along with articles that will be related to war problems and just po- popular media, and um, and I'll be writing this to mainly expose how this zombies are a great metaphor, and are used in entertainment in order to warn the population or world's population on certain global issues that I'll get onto in a bit. And my goal for and what I want my teacher and peers to get out of this is overall to just be more aware of the media and what they consume, and that it's sometimes in our favorite shows or movies there could be warnings for something. And here's my primary source: My Zombie Myself and Why Modern Life Feels Rather Undead. Again, by Chuck Klosterman, who's a renowned writer. He overall has published quite a few novels and has written a bunch of articles. So, getting into the minor claims. For the first one, I'm talking about the pandemic, specifically an interview where Max Brooks talked about the how he predicted or saw coming the pandemic. He he wrote World War Z, just for a little more background, and his main source of inspiration for writing World War Z was his research and studies of um, diseases like the Black Death and the influenza. And he overall talked a lot about how COVID and a zombie apocalypse correlate, but he also talked about how the fear factor between COVID and HIV and AIDS epidemic in the 1980s was similar in a way. Then for my second minor claim, I talk about how the effects of the pandemic going into an individual, so basically mental health. And so right after the pandemic, or even during the pandemic, many people felt depressed, mostly because life just got repetitive and there was really nothing else new to do. Everything just felt the same. And I found a great source that actually talked about this. And it was written by a group of people and from the National Library of Medicine. And they mostly talked about how the pandemic and the and mental health correlated and what were the main effects that got people depressed. Mostly, they And some of these major claims were infection of the brain, indirect immune response to triggering neuroinflammation after syncing storm, inflammatory response from the nervous system, or just like I mentioned, people were inside that were locked in. There were people were quarantining. Uh, there was nothing to do, and it was just the effects of the pandemic. So now moving into the third claim, which is the lack of resources. So during the pandemic, we noticed a lot how people got like very had a spark and they were just driven into like buying a lot of resources that we had enough of them, but they just had an urge to buy them and overall stock up for the pandemic. They thought this they I mean, for example, in the article where, by Culver Jordan, where again he interviewed Max Brooks, he highlighted how people buying toilet was like the panic of the pandemic. That was a basically in a zombie scenario that would have been like the numbers that I was talking about earlier. This would be like the fear factor. And people just got very stressed and did not knew what to do and just started to buy things in order to feel safe. But obviously they didn't leave a lot for other people. So those were that was a major problem over the pandemic. So when it comes to my fourth minor claim, it has to do with overpopulation, and I connected it also with overconsumption from earlier. This mostly regards like not having enough resources to cover everyone, and overall our own greed as the or downfall in a way. And this I found a great source written by Smith R, where he highlighted how overpopulation affected our consumption of raw materials. And he provided a few sources to fix this problem, mostly regarding how poorer nations and richer nations needed to control themselves and, in a way, be more mindful of their consumption of materials. And he also did talk a lot about how families should only like have a few should have fewer children, because if a bigger family requires more materials and increases the population at a higher rate. And we also see other problems like environmental footprints and low energy and like more energy consumption. Um, and moving into the counter arguments, I mostly encountered this even within the documents themselves that people wrote. Um, it mostly regarded the how mental health could be fixed for the case of the effects of the pandemic, and when it came to overpopulation, another counter argument I kept seeing was the carrying capacity. And if you don't know what that is basically the total number of species that an environment could sustain. So basically, basically a lot of people mentioned that we would be hitting that soon, and that would be a way to counter overpopulation. And then that also for overconsumption of raw materials, so that newer and cleaner sources of energy are constantly being developed in order to counter the lack of resources. And in conclusion, zombies just are a great way to represent our fears as a society and show our insecurities. And zombies are also great at showing how having like multiple problems to counter is like quite scary because of how overwhelmed one feels. And it's just a never ending fight with global issues. In this case, you you overcome one pandemic, but then there's another virus that comes in, and it's probably gonna be stronger than the one that we faced not too long ago. And here are my sources.